Testing, 1, 2.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to The Upside. I'm Jonathan Oleski with JMOR, and our show is about to begin. It is my pleasure to introduce our two wonderful hosts, Beth Goldsmith, Chair of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, and Dr. Scott Rifkin, publisher of JMOR. Just a quick programming note, Scott is calling in from his car, so he'll be asking questions with Beth from the road, and I'll be doing the introduction for Scott today. So Beth, take it away.
Thanks, Jonathan. And again, everyone, welcome. Welcome to all our viewers to The Upside. This is our virtual show brought to you by the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore and JMOR Magazine to keep our Baltimore community really informed during these times of uncertainty. And I will add, to always keep us looking for the upside. The coronavirus has been in this country for about 6 months, and many of us are certainly aware of precautions we need to take. But back in early March, I don't think any of us had an idea of what was to come. And that's when Michael Green and his wife Gail traveled to New York to take in some shows and enjoy the city. Little did they know that the trip would change their lives. Shortly thereafter, Michael contracted COVID-19, one of the first cases in Baltimore. He spent the next 2.5 months at Mercy Medical Center, including 49 days on a ventilator, followed by rehab at Levendale. Jonathan?
All right, thank you, Beth. So today we're going to talk with Michael about what he has gone through since his diagnosis. We're also joined by Shannon Woolman, and Shannon, I think you need to unmute yourself there, who came down with COVID-19 this spring, despite being extremely vigilant following all safety protocols. Since she has recovered, she has donated plasma in hopes of helping other community members. Michael and Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today. Beth, why don't you start, then we'll go to Scott.
Okay, thank you both for being here. I feel really honored because I actually know both of you and I knew you before and now I know you after. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories. So why don't we start with that? Shannon, can you just tell us your story?
Sure, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be part of the program today. So thank you so much for having me. You know, my story is different than Michael's, as he's going to share, I'm sure. I got sick in mid-May. So I was several months into the pandemic really being absolutely a real thing in Baltimore. We were still, I think, maybe in phase 1. I mean, so numbers were still really high. So as would be, I really was living what I thought to be a very vigilant lifestyle with mask wearing everywhere and hand washing and very limited activity out and about. I work for Gilchrist, which is a hospice organization in town, and was coming into the office about 1 to 2 days a week. But other than that was telecommuting, and I'd go to the grocery store. So those were sort of my two excursions that I would say where I was around other people. I have no idea how I got how I caught the virus. It had to have been in one of those two sort of locations, which then again just goes to show living the most vigilant lifestyle that I thought I was, and in such limited contact with people, somehow I still did catch it. I woke up one morning with a little bit of a tickle in my throat. Not a sore throat, just a tiny little tickle at the bottom. Not feeling horrible, but feeling a little off. And as the day progressed, I noticed that tickle was turning into a little bit of a cough. You know, my brain didn't go to COVID. Why would it? But I thought, oh, am I going to be catching a cold right now in the middle of May? Who wants that? And but an hour or two later, I thought, you know, I'm just going to take my temperature just to see. I didn't feel like I had a temperature. I did take it, and I did have a fever. I was shocked, and I actually reached out to my sister right away, who's a physician, and she said, "Oh my goodness, you don't have COVID. Don't overreact. But you know what? To be on the safe side, why don't you self-isolate in the house just to make sure, because I live with my wife and my son. So I did, I grabbed all my stuff. I went into the guest room. By the next morning, I woke up, my fever was much higher. I just had a gut feeling that this had to be COVID. I couldn't imagine what else it could be. So I went and got tested, and sure enough, I was positive. I found out a couple days later. Each day I got progressively worse. So the first couple of days I thought, if this is COVID, I can handle this. This is pretty, low key. I didn't lose my sense of taste or smell. My fever continued. I started having some GI issues, which weren't pleasant, but GI issues and a little bit of a fever. I thought, okay. And the cough kind of stayed. 6 days later, I took a turn. My fever stayed, my GI issues stayed, my breathing was starting to be impacted. And I just really felt like the flu times 1,000. I had never been so sick in my whole life. And I have a high threshold for not feeling well. And I actually had open heart surgery in 2011. So I know what it's like to really be knocked out. This was beyond anything I had ever felt before. And I've had the flu. This was definitely not the flu. I did go to the emergency room because my sister recommended, because of my breathing challenges, not to mess around with that. And I was diagnosed with double pneumonia in both lungs. Again, not to the extent of Michael. My other vitals were strong enough that they sent me home, thankfully, because I will say that the fear of being dropped off at an emergency room doorway with no one that can come in with you from your family, and not knowing at that point what my next step would be. What are they going to find? Will I wind up in the ICU? Will I ever see my wife again? I'm a Broadway person. There's an actor, Nick Cordero, that I think a lot of people might have sort of followed his story. His wife dropped him off at the emergency room thinking that, she was going to pick him up in a couple of hours, and he just massively declined. And thoughts like that were in my head. So it was really just terribly frightening. But I did come home, thankfully, and I was sick for about 3 weeks. Finally started to turn the corner. And then just little by little started to sort of heal and feel better. I continued to test positive, though, for about 2 months. I have to have two negative tests in order. At that point, the CDC was still recommending 2 negative tests in a row to return to your healthcare environment workplace. And that I kept retesting positive. It turns out now they say that those retests of positivity are very common, but and now you don't need to have those negative tests anymore. They base the guidelines on some other symptomatic issues. But I finally did have my negative tests, and then I did, as you say, the silver lining was donating plasma, which I was really thrilled to be able to do. I'm part of a Hopkins study.
I'm going to grab you right there because we do want to talk about that.
Okay.
I want to hear, in contrast to this sort of slow and gradual, I really do want to jump over to Michael and let him tell his beginnings, and then we'll do some more follow-up questions. Okay, Michael, are you ready to tell us your story?
Thank you, Beth. My wife and I, Gail, were in New York for the weekend in March, second weekend of March. We were going to see a couple shows, walk around. It was very crowded. We were with a lot of, we were in the middle of a lot of people. We saw the shows. We walked through Times Square. I'm still convinced I got it at the M&M store in Times Square because it was just, so crowded. We came home on Sunday. By Tuesday, I was feeling sick. It got worse as the week went on. Called the doctors. They said, well, try Tamiflu. Maybe it's the flu. I tried the Tamiflu. Didn't help. Then they said, come on in and get tested. And back then they were testing you for the flu first. And then only if the flu came back negative would they then give you a COVID test. So flu came back negative. I took a COVID test at Mercy. And they then called me and said, come into the emergency room. They didn't have the results back, but they said, come into the emergency room. And so I went to the emergency room. Gail dropped me off. They wouldn't let her come in. They then sent her to get tested. She came back positive, but never had a symptom, never had a symptom. They talked to me, they did chest x-rays. They found that my lungs were really in a horrible shape. I was having trouble breathing. And they then admitted me to the ICU because it had gotten worse in just a matter of 2 days. They told me that the only plan was to intubate me and put me on a ventilator, which I had read about and heard that that was the worst thing that you could have happen to you. The doctor later on, after I, a couple months later, said to me, she goes, "You remember what you said to me, the last thing you said to me when I told you we were going to put you on a ventilator?" And I said, "No, I don't remember. What did I say?" She said, "You said to me, I'm going to die, aren't I?" And she said, not everybody does. And so right before they took me, I called Gail, told her where all the stuff was that she didn't know about after 37 years of marriage, told her where all the bank accounts were, and that was it. And then I have no recollection of anything for the next 7 weeks, because for 7 weeks they put me in an induced coma to try to deal with the virus. Now, back then they didn't know a whole lot, apparently, and actually the drug that the president took, they actually gave me that drug in the beginning. I found out the hydrochlor something, whatever it is. They gave me that. They tried all kinds of things. They discovered that putting somebody on their stomach was a good way of getting the breathing to be better. So that was something that they discovered in the course of it. They put me on all kinds of heavy duty medication, narcotics, to the point where they actually had to give me methadone at the end of the coma to get me to come off of these drugs they put me on. And then finally they found a medicine that they heard was successful, and they called the University of Maryland Hospital, and they had 1 dose left, and they got the dose from Maryland, and they put me on that dose of medicine. And apparently
Michael, do you remember what that medicine was?
I don't. But it's being widely used now. They put me on the medicine. I apparently turned the corner, and I was able to come out of the coma after 7 weeks. Didn't know where I was, really. Didn't know what day it was. I didn't even know what month it was. And of course, Gail wasn't around. She couldn't come see me. And so I stayed in the ICU for another 3 weeks. Couldn't talk because I was still on the ventilator. They had put a trach in my throat. So I couldn't talk, I couldn't eat, couldn't drink. And finally they said they were going to send me to rehab with the hopes that one day I would get off the ventilator. And, when somebody tells you that one day you might get off the ventilator, it's hard to accept because the thought of, at my age of 63, living on a ventilator the rest of my life was just, it was a shock. It was really a shock. And so I had a hard time. I had a hard time when I left Mercy, dealing with the fact that, was I strong enough? Did I have the will to get off that ventilator? And I couldn't walk. My body was totally atrophied. Every muscle in my body looked like Jell-O. It was just, it was a mess. And, you just don't know if you have the energy to deal with it. But they transferred me to Levendale, and slowly I got better. I was finally told that I didn't know how to breathe. Um, the one therapist said to me, she goes, you hold your breath a lot. And I said, no, I don't know that I hold my breath a lot. She goes, yeah, when you're doing something, you hold your breath. And I said, okay. And she says, you also don't breathe through your nose. And so I had to learn how to breathe again. I had to learn how to swallow. I had to learn, the first day I got applesauce, I was just like in heaven, because I hadn't had anything to eat for 2 months. So Levendale, after a long period of time, was able to finally get my breathing right. They got me off the ventilator. They got me able to eating again. They took out the trach. I could talk again. And then they worked on me being able to walk. And so I was there for 7 weeks. And so then finally I was ready to get discharged, but I wasn't, as you can see, I still have this oxygen thing. And I can't survive without the oxygen right now. So I'm going to be on that for a while, but if that's the worst of it, I can deal with it.
Michael, I'm going to jump in.
Okay, fine.
Also here. No, thank you so much. And we are also, I remember, I guess it was on Facebook that, us all seeing you being wheeled out of Mercy. And I know you want to talk to us because for those in the audience who may not know this, Michael's doctor was Joseph Costa, who ultimately got COVID later on and actually passed away. I know you want to talk about the healthcare workers on the front line and the people that you worked with. So why don't you share some of that with us now?
So I didn't really know the healthcare workers when I first went in because obviously they put me in a coma right away. And so I really didn't get a chance to meet. I met the one doctor who told me that we're going to intubate you. And then it wasn't until I woke up 2 months, 7 weeks later that I got to meet the doctors. But when I finally was able to talk to Gail and my son, who lives in Chicago, they told me that the doctor, Dr. Joseph Costa, who's the head of the ICU at Mercy, would call them every night. Every night he would call them and tell them what my status was. And, that's unheard of. That's just unheard of. But it was his position that if we're not going to let family and friends come and visit, we need to let them know because they're as much a part of the treatment as you are. And that was his philosophy. And his husband of 26 years talked about that. That was one of the things that he believed in very much, that family was just as important as the patient in terms of taking care of the family. So sadly, we had learned that he had gotten sick from one of the other doctors that Gail was in touch with. And then we found out that he had passed away. He got the COVID. He refused to not work. And despite the fact that he had a serious underlying lung condition, which he shouldn't have been in there. And yet he still worked and to all hours of the night running that ICU. And, Mercy should be very grateful for what he did and everybody who he treated. But you have no idea. I mean, these healthcare workers, they act as if, they don't shy away from you. I mean, they don't, worry that if they touch you or get near you, that all of a sudden it's going to be the end of the world. I mean, these people are amazing, absolutely amazing. And Beth, what drives me crazy is the people out there who don't do what they should be doing right now, who don't wear the mask, who don't socially separate, and they have no idea what these people are dealing with and going through as frontline providers. And if they only knew, I would hope that it would change the way that they deal with, you know, the disease. But, you know, sadly, they don't. So I was, you know, it was very sad when he passed away. So.
Yeah, it was a tragic loss for our community. I know that, you know, he was so dedicated. Shannon, and I've seen you nodding through all of this. I know, first of all, the work you do at Gilchrist, clearly, you know, this is something that is on your mind always. And you not having to have been hospitalized still had the support of your family and, you know, in ways that Michael wasn't able to, perhaps. Want to talk a little about that?
Sure. I mean, first I want to say that I was also struck, even just in the emergency room environment, how the staff just could not have been more to what Michael was saying. Like, there was no fear. They just put their PPE on. And I mean, my nurse came in and out of that room probably 15 times. I almost felt guilty if I needed to ask her to come back, because every time they come in or go out, they have to put the PPE on and take the PPE, you know, off. And she just could, it was really amazing to me. And, you know, in my world of Gilchrist, I'm seeing the staff who are going into homes doing hospice, and all the healthcare workers are just doing exactly what they have trained to do with no fear, and putting themselves at such harm's way with regardless, because that's the commitment that they've made. And Michael, amen to what you said. It just drives me crazy every day when I see on Facebook how many people are not really doing what they should be doing. But I'm lucky. When I was home, you know, my family quarantined for 14 days. You have that table set up outside of your room where all my meals were delivered to, and, you know, not being able to have sort of any interaction with anyone for that period of time was so isolating. And but you do see how many people just, it is that love and support through I'm such a believer in positivity. And I'm sure Michael, I mean, my God, the prayers that must have been coming, you know, to you, I feel like that's can be very, very powerful. And I think we're also lucky in our community here, in our Jewish community. It is such a supportive environment. And I know that people can say what they will about Facebook, but when you put that word out on the street that way, and all the messages of love and prayer and support, I think definitely made a difference. I'm very grateful to my sister, who, like I said, was a physician and really sort of guided along. It's nice to be able to have that connection to either your doctor or someone who really can answer any question, because you get so nervous. What is this? Oh, I have a pain in my calf. Is it a blood clot? You know, I mean, all these little things pop up. But I'll say that after my fever ended and I could leave that room and get a hug, that was really impactful.
I feel like out of sight, out of mind. Is Scott even on anymore? Jonathan, Scott, are you out there? Do you want to ask a question, or should I keep going?
So he's muted right now, Beth. Why don't you go ahead and ask this one, and then Scott, if you're able to ask the next one, go ahead.
Right. Thank you very much. I didn't want to ignore him, but when I don't see his face,
No, I'm back. I dropped off for a second. When I came back on, I couldn't get unmuted. So
Well,
I apologize for that.
So do you want to jump in with a question?
Sure. So it's funny. I'm a physician, but I want to ask non-physician questions. You know, it's Michael made the comment about how he's amazed that people aren't wearing their masks and and keeping distance and doing all the sort of smart things in this. I'd love to hear how you both view this portion of our society that wants to make this disease into a political issue, whether even whatever side of the politics you're on, and people out there that are saying that masks and PPE and separation isn't necessary and it's just a political thing. So I'd love to hear how two survivors of this view that thought process.
Well, it's an interesting issue because it's become political, even though it doesn't have to be political. Wearing a mask is not a difficult thing. It's easy just to put a mask on. And for those who feel so strongly that they don't have to wear a mask, to me, there's no rationale to that. If you can save yourself by wearing a mask, you can save somebody else by wearing a mask, what's the big deal? I mean, it's just a mask. I mean, no, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. You can't always understand what somebody's saying to you when the mask is on. But, it's so easy to do. And when you hear the professionals say that this is probably the best thing you can do, considering, because there's not a lot of things you can do. I mean, I'm not a real believer that if you go into somewhere that even though they've sprayed everything and wiped it down, that there's still not some ability to, maybe get infected. But wearing a mask is really easy, so easy that everybody should just do it routinely. It's like wearing putting on your socks and underwear. I mean, it just should be part of your what you do every day. And so unfortunately it has become a political issue, but that's been something that we're dealing with that I probably shouldn't comment on in terms of my strong feelings about that. The social distancing is tough. Although I will say that I've experienced it recently, and it's a challenge, when you go somewhere and there's these little things on the ground and you have to stand on your thing until it's time for you to go somewhere else. To move up in the line. But, if that's what it is, that's what it is. I mean, it's funny. I've been to Israel a number of times, and people come back from Israel and they say, geez, at every bar and restaurant and store or mall or any place you go, there's always somebody sitting there with a gun, and, how horrible is that, or how difficult is that, but to them, it's a way of life, and they're used to it. And so to go into the store and be checked or something, and then they go in, it's no big deal. And so, if you start to do things, they can become no big deal, and yet it can save lives. So I just think that from a political standpoint, Scott, I wish that everybody could get on that same page, but sadly, it's not going to happen.
Well, if I can add, and without, again, I don't want to get into any sort of political conversation here, but I feel like when the scientists are saying that masks and social distancing make the difference of being effective or not, how can anyone question the science? I don't wear the mask for me. I wear the mask for my mother. I wear the mask for, when I'm walking through the Giant, all of the immunocompromised people that have the capacity of getting ill. I think that, we need to live in a society where it's not about us, it's about others. And back to what I said earlier about our Jewish community, I mean, that's who we are. We so much of how we are raised is to, care for mankind and give tzedakah and think about other people. So in this time, more importantly than ever, I want to make sure that I can still see my mother, who was amazing when I was sick and probably was so scared that I was, not gonna live. I want to be able to make sure she stays healthy and doesn't get ill. She's older, she's at risk. And these are such easy decisions for us to make, and it's about being selfish or not selfish. And I think we should all think about being a little less selfish in terms of this virus.
Shannon.
It seems today to be the most patriotic thing somebody can do is to protect everybody around them. I've mentioned on this show before that my son is an ICU doctor, or was for 4 months, in the middle of the COVID epidemic in New York City. You know, he was at one of the Columbia hospitals and kept a journal during the whole thing. And I've read parts of it, and it's full of hope and fear and depression and interest in how to solve the problems of the disease. But what amazes me is that these folks won't wear masks to protect my son. And I just take it really personally. So I appreciate what you've said to the audience today. We have 3,000 or 4,000 people that listen to this show every week. And I appreciate you getting that message out to the audience about how important it is that they protect their neighbors and their families.
Beth and Scott, we have a question from an audience member. So John in Roland Park, and this is probably more for Shannon than Michael, and Michael, you'll see why in a minute, wanted to know, after you had COVID, if any contract tracing efforts were put in place to try to figure out where you got it, Shannon. Michael, I know you referenced you thought you might have got it at the M&M store in Times Square. So any thoughts on that, Shannon or Michael?
So, you know, when I was ill in the mid-May, contract tracing had begun, but
Right.
I have to say I was disappointed. I did not receive a call from the health department. So there was no contact tracing done for my case.
Got it.
Yeah,
And Shannon,
what I'm hearing in general is that it almost doesn't exist even still, unfortunately. You know, a lot of our politicians, they want to be on TV and on CNN or whatever, but they're not really putting into place what we need to do to get our arms around this thing. It's a shame.
Yeah, and
Although
and
I will say that when I got it, my wife Gail went to great lengths to reach out to people I had been in contact with over that week, even before I had major symptoms, just to let them know that I was now diagnosed positive. So I guess it just depends on, you know, your sensitivity to other people, and, you know, that you want to make sure that everybody's protected. But so.
Thank you.
can we jump back to Shannon? Shannon, tell us about your decision to give plasma and what the experience was like, please.
Well, you know, when I really turned that corner and started to feel better, there wasn't even like a pause in my mind. I mean, I just automatically knew that's something that I wanted to do. And interestingly enough, I don't know if everybody knows this, but a lot of the early convalescent plasma donors were from Orthodox communities in New York, where that initial outbreak had been around that synagogue in New Rochelle. Maybe because I'm in the, you know, have a background in sort of a healthcare environment, and I just knew that I wanted to be able to do that. So I reached out to, there are several places you can donate to now, even just through the Red Cross has convalescent plasma donation availability. But I had seen a post about a research project through a trial at Hopkins. And I reached out to them to see if perhaps I'd be eligible for it. And their study was part of the nationwide convalescent plasma study that they were partnering with Mayo Clinic. And I think it was actually funded through Michael Bloomberg Philanthropies to initially, this was one of the very, very first trials being done with the convalescent plasma. So I reached out. It turned out that I actually was eligible. I had to go through sort of a barrage of verbal questionnaires, and then they had to do blood work to make sure that my antibody, A, that I had the antibodies, and B, that they were, you know, several other things with my blood work looked like it was a good match. And it was. My antibodies, apparently if you have 3.0 to 4.0, that's like a really good range for antibodies after COVID. I had 9.5. So I was a superstar. So I've donated plasma twice now. And I really am so glad that I did it. I do feel, again, it's my sort of, they think the window of antibodies might not last very long. So I'm living my life now as though I could easily catch it again. I've always kind of felt that way. A lot of people say, oh my God, aren't you so relieved? You've had it. Now you've had it. I think I could totally catch it again. And the science, again, as it goes on, is so new. There's so much they don't know yet about it, but they think that the window of antibodies might only be 3 months. So I figured if I'm only going to have these antibodies for 3 months, I'd rather be able to help somebody or more in that 3-month window. So that's what I did. And I was happy about it. And what I really liked, I've tried to kind of be a spokesperson on Facebook about just being sick and the plasma, and several people have reached out to me about how to donate. So I feel like I've kind of paid it forward a little bit, and some people have gone ahead and donated plasma when they've recovered. So that's been good.
And Shannon, explain how simple it is to give the plasma.
Oh my gosh, if you've ever given blood, it's almost exactly the same way, it just takes a little bit longer. So when you go to donate, they kind of set you up in the chair and they put your, the thing in your arm, and they're actually, it's very interesting. I didn't even know how it worked, but they're taking the blood out of you, they're pulling the plasma out, and then the blood goes back into you. So you're actually not losing your blood, you're just losing you're kind of donating your plasma specifically. So your blood actually goes back into your body, and then those antibodies regenerate. So
to explain that a little bit, your blood is made up of cells, red cells and white cells, and then a fluid that carry the cells along called the plasma. So what Shannon was describing is they're giving you back all your red and white cells, and they're just taking the liquid component where the antibodies are floating around.
Exactly.
Thank you, Scott. We're our own doctor on the scene. Michael, do you want to add anything to your convalescing story? I know when I first spoke to you to ask you to be here, I can't tell you how many people were so excited to hear that you were out taking walks. So I know it's been a really long haul. You want to tell us a little about where you stand recovery-wise?
Well, Shannon just convinced me I need to go give plasma. Gail went to give plasma, but apparently they said her veins were too small and she couldn't give it. So I think I've got to go do it now. You guilted me, like you can't believe just now, into getting the plasma. I will tell you that once I got off the ventilator and they took the trach out, it's like there was a sense of total relief. And then I could focus on trying to learn how to walk again and build up my muscles. Came home, had home rehab, and it was a challenge. I mean, it was, Gail was pretty much taking care of everything for me, not only physically, but, I'm a lawyer. I have my own law practice. So she stepped in and she took care of all of that. And, that was weighing on me a lot because I probably, there's a likelihood I'll retire because of this, which wouldn't have happened for another 3 or 5 years. But slowly it's gotten better and better. It helps that a week after I got home, my daughter had our first grandchild. And so that has kept us very excited, whenever she comes over, and they live right down the street. So she comes over a lot, and we get to see him all the time. And so that's been a really nice, thing for us. And it's kind of takes your mind off of your problems. You don't worry so much about what you're dealing with. And so I'm getting there. I mean, I'm walking without a walker and a cane now, and I just have to lug around the oxygen when we go out. But very thankful that I'm able to do this and actually sit here today and talk with you all. And, for anybody who's out there who gets sick, I think Shannon and I would both tell them, you can get through it. You can get through it. It's not easy, but you can get through it. And so, they should, take solace in that. And plus, I got to believe that they know so much more now than they did back in March in terms of how to treat it, and what to do. So, that's where I've been.
Yeah, to follow that up a little bit, first of all, your voice sounds amazingly strong for somebody who's been on a vent, had a trach, and you have oxygen. So your voice sounds really strong. So I suspect your lungs really are getting better, which is a nice thing. Yeah, people can get better, and the scientists really have learned more, particularly about using high-dose steroids during the disease. And it looks like the death rate and the serious complication rate is coming down a bit. So that's good news for everybody. But the warning that you've given about wearing protective gear and being careful is powerful at the moment.
I do have permanent damage to my lungs. Unfortunately, I had a CT done a couple weeks ago, and they told me that the pulmonologist said that there is some permanent damage to my lungs, which he said will never go away. So, if that's it, if that's the worst, then, you deal with it. You deal with it, so, that's what you do.
And I've developed some type of like a reflux or a GI issue that I just have never had prior to this. I'm just going to be graphic because here we are, but I had diarrhea for 15 days, nonstop. I mean, throughout the illness and throughout that 15 days of fever, and that cleared up. But ever since, I have ongoing reflux or some type of gas issue. So I'm going to go to the gastroenterologist. I've been trying to control it on my own, but I think that's sort of this lingering issue that is my souvenir. I did have brain fog for a good several weeks after, and I was really sad and worried about that because in my line of work, I need to be very clear. I need to be able to I'm not doing a good job right now, but I need to be very clear with my words, and I write a lot and I speak a lot, and I just could not. It's what they say, that brain fog that they talk about, and I really did feel that. But I could feel that lift. I mean, I absolutely could feel that lifting, and I'm almost at 100%, not quite, but I'm much, much better with that. But the GI stuff remains.
Well, I will tell you that when I came home, I had double vision. I would get lightheaded and blackout on occasion. And I had tremors. And so my hands would start shaking uncontrollably. And I couldn't write or pick up anything, without, dropping it. That's all gone away. And so it's true, Shannon, like you said, you might have some symptoms of it, but eventually those go away. And so, you just have to be patient and wait it out a little bit and see what happens.
Jonathan, do you have any? I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to ask Jonathan if we had any other questions from the audience.
No, we don't. But Shannon and Michael, this is very powerful. Thank you so much. Very, very important, the message that you're telling the audience today.
Thank you. I'm sure Michael feels the same way, but I mean, ever since this happened to me, I might be a little too vocal of a spokesperson. I want everybody to know about it. I want everybody to understand that it can happen to anybody. To Michael's point, you can absolutely get through it, but anyone has the capability of being ill. And I think we're going to learn that a lot of people were asymptomatic and had it. So those people, are spreading if they don't wear their mask and social distance. And I just think it's important until we can all be vaccinated to continue to live our lives listening to the scientists, not making it political, and just really caring about our community, because that's the only way that we can keep this from those numbers rising right back up to where they were. I'm all for wanting the economy to stay open and our businesses to stay open. The only way we can do that is if we don't just start to let it, stop paying attention to all that we should be doing.
I'm glad you mentioned the vaccines too. At some point, whether it's November, December, January, March, in there, there'll be vaccines. And the vaccines will probably be effective. And anything that we can do and you can do and your voice can do as survivors of this to encourage people to take the vaccine and not get into that crazy anti-science, anti-vaxxer stuff will be truly, truly helpful, because voices like yours are really going to matter when that happens.
Well, I'm all for a vaccine, but I'm for a safe vaccine. And I'm for a vaccine that the scientists believe it's the appropriate time to disseminate it to society and not rush it for other reasons.
So over the weekend, all the vaccine makers got together and issued a statement, which was really wonderful, basically saying we are not going to produce our vaccines for the public until they're proven safe. In other words, they basically said we're not getting involved in politics.
Well,
and
from
all the big companies said it over the weekend together as a joint statement, which I think was long overdue.
From their mouths to God's ears, Scott.
Yeah.
And we'll see what really happens, because, who knows which one of them wants to be the first. And, being the first for this vaccine is going to be huge, from a financial standpoint for whoever that company is that's producing this vaccine. So we'll see. I'm going to hold my breath on that one. One thing I'll say, I don't know how we accept the fact that 186,000 people have died in such a short period of time. And we can't lose sight of those people. I mean, you can't say there was no reason for it, because, a pandemic's a pandemic. But, I think about myself at 63, and I didn't die, and I got a break. I was lucky. But there were so many young people who died and had their whole lives ahead of them. And we just really need to think about them more and think about what they went through. It's just so many people, too many people. It's going to be 200,000 by the end of the year or more.
Yeah, the projections are actually up to about 400 by the time it's over. I mean, it's unbelievable.
For a country like ours to have that happen, it's shameful. It really is shameful.
Yeah, no, we agree. Well, thank you both. I mean, your stories are powerful. I can get on and talk medicine, and Beth can get on and talk about the social side of this and what Associated is doing and all the wonderful work they do. But there's no message more powerful than that comes from you. So we appreciate you took the time today. This show will be viewed by thousands of folks, and hopefully over the next few months continue to be viewed by folks, because it stays in the world of the cloud that I don't quite understand. And so that message is going to save lives, and we appreciate you guys taking the time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, I guess while we're saying our thank yous,
Jonathan.
I will certainly add mine to both Michael and Shannon for being here today. It really, as Scott said, what happens is we're live now, but hopefully everyone who was on this show right now, listening and watching, will call a friend, will post it on their Facebook page, and let the rest of the community know so that they can tune in and really see. This was an extremely meaningful show, educational, and also so heartfelt from both of you. We obviously are so thrilled that you both are recovering, moving forward, and we wish you a continued wonderful and recovery. wonderful recovery and good life ahead. Michael, retirement's not so bad. So it'll give us more time to go to Israel when we can.
Wait to get back.
Yeah. All right. So before we sign off today, I just want to also remind everyone about an upcoming program. It's called the Community Kvel. Join us and other Jewish federations from around the country on September 16th at 1:30 p.m. There's surprise celebrity guests, actually, and we'll be kicking off our campaign at that time. You can go to the Associated's Community Events page to learn more about that. And as always, you can go to associated.org and jmoreliving.com for more information, stories, and resources. And please don't forget to join us again next Tuesday, September 15th at noon. And in the meantime, to everyone out there, please stay well.
Thank you, everyone. Shannon, Michael, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Happy and healthy New Year.
Yes.